I, 32F, need advice about a situation that's tearing my family apart. My husband Rob, 34M, and I have been married for 6 years, together for 9. We met in college when I was in nursing school and he was studying computer science. Rob has always been the stable, responsible type, got a good job in tech right after graduation, saved money, and planned for the future. I work as a nurse practitioner at the local hospital. We bought our dream house 3 years ago, a beautiful 4-bedroom place in a nice neighborhood that we worked hard to afford. The problem is Rob's older brother Mike, 35M. To understand the situation, you need some background. Mike has always been the troubled one in the family. Their parents gave both boys the same opportunities, but while Rob excelled in school and sports, Mike struggled. He dropped out of 3 different colleges, lived in their parents' basement until 30, and never held a job longer than a year. Their parents enabled him by always making excuses. He's sensitive, he's creative, he just needs time to find his path. I first met Mike at a family dinner when Rob and I started dating. He spent the whole evening making subtle digs at Rob and trying to one-up him. When Rob announced our engagement, Mike got drunk and gave a rambling speech about how I was only with Rob for his money. I actually made more than Rob at the time. Rob's parents quickly hushed it up and said Mike was just emotional about his brother getting married. Things improved slightly when Mike finally got a job as a sales manager 3 years ago. He moved out of his parents' house and seemed to be getting his life together. Rob was thrilled, he's always wanted a closer relationship with his brother. But last March, Mike called Rob in tears saying he'd been fired for unfair performance metrics and couldn't make rent. Without consulting me, Rob offered to let Mike stay with us temporarily. When Rob told me later that night, I was hesitant. I'd seen how Mike took advantage of his parents' generosity, but Rob was so excited about helping his brother that I agreed. We set some ground rules. Mike would actively job hunt, help with household chores, and contribute to groceries once he got unemployment benefits. He agreed to everything. The first month wasn't terrible. Mike seemed genuinely motivated, spent mornings applying for jobs, and even cooked dinner a few times. He was respectful of our space and kept his temporary room tidy. Rob was happy having his brother around, and I started thinking maybe Mike had finally matured. But by month 2, things started changing. Mike stopped cleaning up after himself, claiming he was too depressed about unemployment to do chores. He started staying up until 4 a.m. playing video games, then sleeping all day. The few times I mentioned the noise keeping me up before early hospital shifts, he'd say I was being oversensitive. Month 3 is when I noticed money disappearing from our shared grocery fund. Mike had promised to contribute $200 monthly from his unemployment benefits, but he always had excuses. The payment was delayed, he had to pay his phone bill, he needed new clothes for interviews. Meanwhile, I'd find receipts from gaming stores and expensive takeout orders. By month 4, Mike had completely taken over our guest room and home office. His stuff was everywhere: dirty laundry, empty energy drink cans, gaming equipment he'd bought with borrowed money from Rob. When I tried talking to Rob about it, he'd get defensive. He's really struggling with his mental health, or he just needs more time to get back on his feet. The job situation got ridiculous. Mike would find problems with every opportunity. One company offered him $75,000 in sales. He said it was insulting given his experience. Another had a 30-minute commute, too far. A startup wanted him to do cold calls, beneath his skills. Rob kept believing his excuses and even gave him money for interview clothes and networking events. Later I found PayPal charges to online gambling sites and gaming platforms. Things got really bad around month 6. Mike started making snide comments when Rob wasn't around, saying I was lucky Rob couldn't see what a gold digger I was, or asking if I was satisfied with just Rob. Gross. When I told Rob, Mike would act confused and say I was misinterpreting his jokes. He started going through our things when we were at work, claiming he was looking for a phone charger or borrowed a shirt for an interview. The situation exploded last month. I had just finished a brutal 12-hour night shift dealing with multiple traumas. All I wanted was sleep, but I came home to disaster. Mike had thrown a huge party while we were at work. There were beer bottles everywhere, cigarette burns on our $3,000 couch, and someone had vomited on our kitchen floor. 2 strangers were passed out in our living room. When I confronted Mike, he got aggressive. He claimed Rob had given permission, he hadn't, and said I was being a controlling bitch for getting upset. I called Rob at work, and Mike started recording on his phone, only catching my angry reaction but not what led to it. He sent the edited clips to Rob's family, making it seem like I was abusing him. Things got worse when Mike told Rob's parents I'd been sexually harassing him. He claimed I walked around in revealing clothes trying to seduce him, I wear scrubs or sweats at home, and made inappropriate comments. He even showed Rob some heavily edited videos where my words were taken completely out of context. Some of Rob's family believed him and started calling me a predator. The truth finally came out when our security cameras caught Mike bringing random people into our house and going through our bedroom while we were at work. He claimed he was gathering evidence that I was cheating on Rob. When Rob saw the unedited security footage and realized how Mike had manipulated everyone, he finally told him to leave. Mike refused, saying he had tenant rights since he'd lived there nearly a year. We had to hire a lawyer and start formal eviction proceedings. He finally left last week, but not before stealing Rob's entire watch collection, worth over $50,000, and my grandmother's jewelry. Now, a week later, Mike sent us a long email. He claims he's sorry for everything, admits to lying and manipulation, and says he was just jealous of our successful relationship in life. He wants another chance and promises to follow strict rules if we let him move back in, getting a job within 30 days, paying rent, no guests, complete transparency with his phone and computer. Rob thinks we should consider it since Mike seems genuinely remorseful and everyone deserves a second chance. I'm completely against it, but this situation has already caused so much strain on our marriage. Some family members are calling me cold-hearted for not believing in forgiveness. Am I being unreasonable? How do I make Rob see that letting Mike back in would be a huge mistake? Update 1 first, I want to thank everyone who commented on my original post. Special thanks to those who suggested checking our credit reports immediately. You literally saved us from financial ruin. The situation has gotten so much worse, but at least we're finally seeing Mike's true colors. After reading the comments, I sat down with Rob and we pulled our credit reports. What we found made me physically sick. Mike had opened 7 credit cards in Rob's name while living with us, using the personal documents he had access to in our home office. The total fraud amount is over $40,000 spread across different cards. He had even changed the mailing addresses for the statements to a P.O. box, which is why we never knew about them. Rob was in shock when we discovered this. He kept saying there must be some mistake, that maybe his identity had been stolen by someone else. I gently pointed out that the cards were opened while Mike lived with us and had access to everything. The spending patterns matched perfectly: online gambling sites, gaming purchases, expensive electronics that mysteriously appeared in Mike's room, and cash advances from casinos. When we confronted Mike over the phone, he initially denied everything. Then he tried to claim Rob had given him permission to open one emergency card. Absolutely not true. Finally, when we told him we were going to the police, he broke down crying and admitted everything. Apparently, he has a severe gambling addiction that started even before he lost his job. He claimed he was going to win big and pay everything back before we found out. Rob wanted to handle it within the family and suggested setting up a repayment plan. I put my foot down and insisted we file a police report. This isn't just about money, it's identity theft and fraud. While we were at the police station, the detective asked if we'd spoken to other family members about checking their credit too. That's when things got even worse. We called Rob's parents to warn them, but they initially dismissed our concerns. His mom said we were being dramatic and should work things out privately. The detective helped them pull their credit reports right there on speakerphone. The silence when they saw their reports was devastating. Mike had stolen their identities too, opening multiple credit cards and taking out personal loans in their names. Their total losses are around $125,000, most of their retirement savings. The investigation revealed Mike had been doing this for months before moving in with us. He'd been stealing mail from family members, photographing documents, and building up credit lines slowly so no one would notice. The detective said it was one of the most systematic family fraud cases she'd seen. Rob's parents, who initially blamed me for forcing them to investigate Mike, are now completely broken. They had to meet with financial advisors who told them they'll likely have to sell their house to pay off the fraudulent debt. His mom finally admitted that Mike had similar issues in college. He stole his roommates' credit cards and they had to pay everyone back to avoid him getting arrested. They kept it quiet and believed him when he promised to change. The investigation uncovered even more victims. Remember the ex-girlfriend I mentioned who let Mike stay with her after he left our house? He convinced her to empty her savings account, $28,000, for a guaranteed investment opportunity in some crypto scheme. She filed her own police report when she realized the money was gone. Mike disappeared 3 days ago when he learned how many people were filing police reports. He's not answering calls and his phone is off. The police say this is common with fraud suspects and they're monitoring his known locations. They found evidence that he'd been planning this for years, keeping detailed notes about family members' routines and when they received important mail. Rob is completely devastated. He hasn't slept properly in days and keeps blaming himself for enabling Mike all these years. His parents finally told us about all the times they covered up Mike's stealing and lying. In high school he stole from teachers, in college he scammed classmates, and at his first job he was fired for stealing company credit cards. They always believed his promises to change and paid people off to avoid charges being filed. The district attorney is building a case against Mike. They found evidence of identity theft and fraud going back at least 5 years, with possibly dozens of victims. Between family members, his ex-girlfriend, and others they've identified so far, the total amount stolen is over $200,000. The detective says he's looking at serious prison time given the scale of the fraud. Some extended family members are still defending Mike, saying he needs rehab, not prison. But even Rob's parents, who enabled him for so long, agree he needs to face consequences this time. They're working with victim services to figure out how to rebuild their retirement fund. Rob and I are working with identity theft specialists to clean up our credit. Thankfully, most of the card companies are removing the fraudulent charges since we filed police reports. We've had to change all our accounts, get new credit cards, and set up extensive monitoring. The stress of all this has been intense, but at least Rob and I are united now in dealing with it. I'll update again when there are new developments. The police think they're close to locating Mike, and more victims are coming forward every day as the investigation continues. Thank you all for your support and especially for pushing us to check those credit reports before things got even worse. Update 2: things have taken an even darker turn since my last update. Mike was finally arrested last week trying to cross into Canada at a remote border crossing in Montana. He had multiple fake IDs, burner phones, and almost $15,000 in cash. The Border Patrol agent who caught him said he was using our father-in-law's identity but didn't look anything like the photo. During the arrest, they found 3 notebooks in his car detailing all his scams. The most disturbing part was his future plans section, which included a detailed strategy for moving back in with us. He had already created fake documents in my name and was planning to take out mortgages and loans once he regained our trust. The police said the level of planning showed this wasn't just opportunistic theft, it was calculated, long-term fraud. At his bail hearing, we learned the real reason he lost his sales job. He hadn't been fired for poor performance like he claimed. The police found emails showing he had embezzled over $80,000 from client accounts over 2 years. His company discovered it but agreed not to press charges if he repaid everything and resigned quietly. Instead of repaying them, he used that time to delete evidence and transfer the money to offshore accounts. Rob finally got the courage to go through the boxes of Mike's belongings that were left in our garage. What we found was chilling. Mike had kept detailed journals for years, and his hatred for me was evident on every page. He blamed me for stealing Rob and destroying his perfect life. According to his writings, before I came along, Rob would have let him live with them indefinitely and given him access to all his money. The journals revealed he'd been planning to break up our marriage from the day he moved in. Every fight he caused, every rumor he spread about me, every time he walked around half naked when Rob wasn't home, it was all documented as part of his strategy. He even wrote about purposely leaving his door open while changing, hoping I'd walk by so he could accuse me of peeping. But the worst discovery came when the police tech unit analyzed Mike's laptops and phones. He had installed hidden cameras throughout our house, in air vents, behind picture frames, even in our bedroom light fixture. The footage goes back months. I feel physically sick knowing he was watching us in our most private moments. The detective said he likely installed them to gather material he could edit and use against us later. Some of the footage had already been edited into short clips, usually taking my words out of context or capturing only the end of arguments he provoked. They found draft emails where he planned to anonymously send these clips to Rob's work contacts and my hospital administration. He wanted to destroy both our careers. Rob is not handling these revelations well. He started counseling last week to deal with the betrayal. Finding out that his brother spent years plotting against his wife while pretending to love and support him has shaken him to his core. He keeps apologizing for not believing me sooner about Mike's behavior. The police investigation has expanded as they go through Mike's records. They found a storage unit rented under a fake name containing stolen items from multiple victims, including Rob's missing watches and my grandmother's jewelry. But most of the valuable pieces had already been sold to pawn shops across 3 states. Rob's parents are devastated. They've put their house on the market to pay off the debt Mike accumulated in their names, but the realtor says they'll still be about $50,000 short. Their retirement is gone. The shame of having to tell their friends and church community what happened has isolated them completely. The family is fractured. Rob's sister hasn't spoken to anyone since discovering Mike stole her teenage daughter's college fund. Several cousins are fighting over who should have noticed something was wrong. 2 aunts still defend Mike and claim we're all exaggerating to punish him for his addiction. I can't sleep in our bedroom anymore knowing we were being filmed. Rob and I are staying in the guest room while contractors remove all the ceiling fixtures and vents to check for more cameras. We're selling the house as soon as possible, neither of us can feel safe here again. The district attorney says they have enough evidence for a strong case, even without the new victims still coming forward. Mike's preliminary hearing is next month. His public defender has already reached out about a possible plea deal, but we're waiting to hear the terms. I'll update again when we know more about the legal proceedings. Right now, we're focused on rebuilding our sense of security and helping Rob's parents navigate their new financial reality. Update 3. I think this will be my final update on the Mike situation. After months of legal proceedings, he accepted a plea deal last week. He'll serve 5 years in federal prison with no possibility of early release, followed by 3 years of supervised release. He's also required to pay restitution to all his victims, though the prosecutor admits we'll likely never see most of that money. During the sentencing hearing, Mike tried to give a tearful speech about his gambling addiction and how sorry he was for hurting everyone. The judge wasn't moved, especially after reading victim impact statements from Rob's parents and his teenage niece whose college fund he stole. The judge called him a calculated predator who used family connections to perpetrate his fraud. 2 days after sentencing, Mike sent us a 12-page letter from jail. He claimed he's found God, is attending gambling addiction meetings, and wants to make amends. He asked us to visit him, send him money for commissary, and keep his belongings safe until he's released. The most disturbing part was his suggestion that we should start saving money now so we can help him get back on his feet in 5 years. Rob returned the letter unopened with "Do not contact" written across it. We've moved to a new house in a different neighborhood and changed everything: phone numbers, email addresses, social media accounts. Our lawyer helped us legally change my social security number after discovering Mike had already started using it for new credit applications from jail. Rob is considering changing his too. Rob's parents had to declare bankruptcy and sell their house of 40 years. They now live in a small one-bedroom apartment and both had to take part-time jobs to supplement their social security. The shame of losing their retirement and having their son in federal prison has isolated them from their church community. They're seeing a therapist to deal with the trauma of having enabled Mike's behavior for so many years. Mike's ex-girlfriend, Sarah, started a support group for his victims after discovering how many people he'd scammed. They've identified at least 22 victims now, with total losses approaching $400,000. Many were family friends or distant relatives who trusted him because of his connection to Rob's family. Sarah's group has been helping them file victim impact statements and navigate the identity theft recovery process. Some extended family members are still pushing us to forgive and forget. Rob's aunt sent us a long email about how prison won't help him and we should pay for private rehab instead. We blocked her number after she threatened to bring Mike's story to the local news to expose our cruelty. She doesn't know that 3 journalists have already contacted us about covering the story, but we've declined. The strain nearly broke our marriage, but Rob and I have come out stronger. Marriage counseling helped us process the betrayal and rebuild trust. Rob still has occasional nightmares about the hidden cameras, but he's working through it in therapy. The biggest test of our healing came last month when we found out I'm pregnant. Instead of joy, Rob's first reaction was fear that Mike would somehow hurt our child. But after processing it with his therapist, he's excited about becoming a father. We've gone completely no contact with Mike and anyone who still supports him. Rob's sister has done the same after discovering Mike had also stolen her identity to take out student loans. The family is permanently fractured, but those of us who've cut ties are slowly healing. Sometimes Rob still struggles with guilt, wondering if he could have prevented this by not enabling Mike's behavior for so long. But we both know maintaining contact would only give Mike more opportunities to hurt us and our future child. We're focusing on building a new life without the shadow of Mike's manipulation hanging over us.